Greetings, COM709. This is Ben Frazier. Wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking to you today. Hopefully, I'm glad you're in your class first. Hopefully, you're enjoying it. It is, I know, a lot of reading, and yet some of this reading is very, very important. We started off with Nikolai, of course, and the main thing I wanted you to get out of that book is to look at the tension in our culture that exists today between the so-called religious worldview and the secular worldview. And this has been going on for really over hundreds of years, not with Lewis and Freud, but the religious and the secular worldview. And more importantly, in the last 100 years and the last 50 years, the influence and the dominance of science that comes with its reason and rationale, and a certain type of rationale that lifts and privileges in our culture reason over those kinds of things that the religious worldview sees as revelation. And so there is that tension, and we feel it today in a lot of the books that we hear and a lot of the religious and science arguments that are involved in. How do we know epistemologically? How do we know knowledge-wise? Do we know through some sort of divine revelation that God gives us in a miraculous and revelatory way, or do we know through a reasoned, careful, scientific way? And you'll see embedded in both Freud and Lewis the tension of those two ways of knowing, and that our culture is still feeling today. As exemplified to some extent by the existentialists, as exemplified more recently by the postmodernists, who in a concert with the Christians have a critique that is very similar, particularly the postmodernists and the Christians, of modernity. Now, the answers that we have are very different, but the critique of modernity, that revelation is downplayed, and that reason needs to be criticized. Postmodernists would agree, and many of them, and the Christians would agree. You get somebody like Leotard that begins to critique the meta-narrative, the grand meta-narrative. And Christians for a long time have said this, because if the meta-narrative, the big story, comes through science and can only be verified through reason and science, then that marginalizes revelation. So that tension I wanted you to see and feel, and we'll see that in a lot of the theology that we and artists today that we're looking at and studying. Secondly, we went into, so that's the first book, which hopefully was a fun read, and maybe it's the best, for some of you, maybe the best read of the semester. The next book that we, of course, looked at last week was Augustine, a giant of a figure from Africa, as you know. And what has been misunderstood, I think, about Augustine is that he is sort of relegated to the Neoplatonist school. And really, there's a lot of people that are beginning to criticize that. And there's a new book out right now on Augustine, and that looks at people like Derrida and people like Leotard and many of the continental thinkers. The book argues that they have a lot in common with Augustine and do not necessarily see him as a Neoplatonist. So even though he is an older writer and a powerful writer, I think, probably his best work, I mean, he's written 3 absolutely amazing works, The City of God and On Christian Doctrine, as well as Confessions. But Confessions is such a personal and powerful book that a different sort of book than we normally read, that I just really wanted you to be introduced to him through that book. And do not let the way he wrote so long ago in any way detour you from understanding the power and the significance of his work today, because I think he still has much to say and teach us. And the honesty about his own life and his own conversion and his own life of struggle and sin. And I just love the life of Augustine. It's such a great and visual. The fact that he wanted to be a monk and he went back to Africa and was in church, and people rose up and brought him forward and ordained him that very day, just in the middle of service, against his will, and yet he was faithful and was the bishop there. Just a wonderful story, and his whole life is very, very interesting. So then, of course, this week we're getting to two very influential people of the 20th century, Chesterton from a Catholic view and Lewis from more of a Protestant view, and we're seeing how they, as apologists, began to explain and communicate the faith. I hope you enjoy reading those two readings this week, and you're to write one review of both of their works, and so compare and contrast those two works. I really, in some ways, I think a better read for Chesterton is Everlasting Man, but it's such a long book that I didn't think I could include it along with Mere Christianity, so we went with Orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is a very, very good book too, but both I think are worthy reads. Hope you're enjoying the class. I want you to begin to think right away about the paper you have due for this class and how you want to look at a Christian artist or theologian and their contribution to communication theory. Even a Christian philosopher, when someone who's made a Christian statement of faith, and how they might contribute to our understanding of communication theory. The one thing I want to say is just because somebody's popular doesn't mean that they've made a contribution to communication theory. So we have a lot of people today that are very, very popular, some popular ministers or artists. But what we want to say is, and look at, is what contribution do these people of faith make to communication theory? And therefore, there needs to be some writings on them. You need to have something that you can really look at and begin to analyze. Hopefully this will help you. Good having you in class with me, and I hope to be coming back to you and talking to you like this occasionally as the semester progresses. God bless you, and have a great week. Hope you had a good vacation yesterday, holiday, and look forward to seeing you in your papers. Thank you. Bye-bye.